Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored Never Boring. Based on the poll I ran for the Always Bored Never Boring club members, the next miniature in my painting queue is the Dwarf hero from Advanced Heroquest. This is a lovely miniature, an improvement on the excellent Dwarf from Heroquest, and a sculpt that for me easily surpasses the over-the-top design of the Dwarf from the subsequent Warhammer quest. As you can see, I've kept the Dwarf's shield detached to paint separately, and I've used a spray undercoat of Chaos Black. The black base will help with shading and preventing the final paint job from looking too bright. Once that undercoat is dry, we're going to start by painting the small amount of skin the Dwarf has on show. For this we're going to use a base coat of Bugman's Glow. I'm going to use just a touch of water to thin this paint down. You don't want to risk clagging up details with thick paint at the best of times, but it's really important when painting faces because you don't want to lose all those fine facial features. And you can see I'm not being too neat here, I'm just making sure the face and mouth are completely covered. And I'm also going to use Bugman's Glow for the parts of the arms between the gauntlets and the tunic. I'm assuming that's bare skin, but of course you could paint it as an undershirt if you prefer. Once the two coats of Bugman's Glow are completely dry, we're going to shade the skin. For this I'm using Reikland Flesh Shade. I'm going to put quite a lot of shade on the skin so we get some really heavy recess shading. And you can use a different shade if you like. I've gone with Reikland to preserve some of the pinky fleshiness of the Bugman's Glow. When that's dry we can go back and highlight the raised details. We're using thinned Bugman's Glow again, and we're picking out the cheekbones, the tips of the nose and the lips. With so little skin on show, we're going to stop at that, but there are a few more facial features we want to work on. We're going to get some pallid witch flesh and we're going to thin it just slightly, and then we're going to use a fine brush to dot in our dwarf's teeth. We're also going to use this pallid witch flesh to line in the eyeballs. This miniature does have pronounced eyeballs, so this is a little easier than on some other miniatures, but even so, painting eyes is a pain. Take your time, and if you do mess it up, you can always go back to your flesh colours to tidy up the edges. We then need to dot in the pupils. For this, I'm using my secret weapon, which is Army Painter Grim Black Speed Paint. The very fluid consistency makes it easy to work with, and if you overpaint, most of the paint will just run into the recesses of the eye sockets and you can easily wipe off any excess. We put just a drop on our brush and dot it on, and that's it. We're done with the eyes. We can breathe out now. The next thing we want to do is block in the beard and hair. For this we're using Dawnstone. I'm going to thin it down a little and I'm going to apply 2 coats. It doesn't matter if your coverage is a little patchy here, that can help to make hair look a little more natural. It's up to you really. But I'm going to carefully colour the whole beard, making sure I don't get anything on the face. And while we are going to shade this beard, we aren't going to do that just yet. First we're going to switch to Leadbelcher and we're going to put a coat of this over the chainmail. We can also put a little of this on the dome of the dwarf's helmet and the head of his mighty warhammer. And again, we want to focus on getting nice, smooth coverage. Once that's completely dry, we are going to switch to Nuln Oil. We're going to use this to recess shade the chainmail and really knock down that shiny metallic colour. We'll also put this over the hammer and helmet and also the beard and hair. As a final touch, I will also drop a small amount into the open mouth around the teeth. Next we want to add a little texture and highlighting to this beard. The easiest way to do that is with a quick dry brush. I'm going to use Administratum Grey for this, using a small dry brush and just taking care to only hit the beard. If you need to, you can switch to a really small brush just to do a little highlighting on the moustache as well. Of course you can do more highlights than this if you want to, maybe even going all the way up to white, but the one pass is good enough for me. I'm then switching to Mournfang Brown, which is a really nice rich brown. We're going to use it on the belt, the little pouch hanging off the belt, and the handle of the warhammer. As before, we want to thin this paint, but Mournfang has decent coverage, 1 coat should be enough. Regardless, with that done, we can move on to the rest of our metallics. For these we're using Balthazar Gold, which has a really lovely copper tone to it, and we're going to use this for the belt buckle and the diamond shape on the warhammer. I'm also painting the trim of the helmet in gold, and that includes the feathers, which I'm going to assume are sculpted metal details rather than real feathers. If you want, you can paint them like real feathers. Just pick a colour, base coat them, shade them, and then dry brush them with a light version of the base colour. And of course, we want to be careful, take our time so we don't overpaint anything we've already done. Next we're going to get our Painter's Choice Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to wash over the Mournfang Brown and the Balthazar Gold. This will make the gold look more coppery and beaten up, and it will provide some nice recess shading on all of this. Once that's dry, it's back to Balthazar Gold, and we'll use that to do some edge highlighting on the belt buckle and also on the wings and the rim of the helmet. Take it steady here, don't overdo it, and try to keep the highlights clean and straight. I'm also going to take this opportunity to get my lead belcher and just do the same thing on the silver, lining in the raised details on the chainmail and adding a spot highlight on the top of the helmet. I'm not going to highlight the hammer though, I like it looking very dull and used. With all the metallics finally finished, we can go back to our Mournfang and do a quick highlight on the pouch, the belt and the handle of the Warhammer. Again, we are just going over the raised details, making sure we don't overpaint any of the recess shading from the Agrax Earthshade. And as I'm doing this, I'm aware our dwarf is very dark, all metal and brown, so what I'm going to do next is add a bright colour by doing his tunic red. All dwarfs are basically Santa anyway. I'm going to use Mephiston red for my base colour because frankly it's awesome, and you can put it straight over a black undercoat and it will cover just fine. Growing up, painting red over black was a fool's errand, and even now I'm impressed with how Mephiston red covers. But anyway, the same rules apply. We thin the paint and we apply it carefully to get a nice smooth finish, and if we need to do 2 coats, then by all the gods we shall paint 2 coats. Once that Mephiston red is dry, I'm going to use some red tone from Army Painter to shade it. Using the red tone will enrich the red while still providing recess shading. And then we're going to switch back to our Mephiston red, and keeping it thin, we're going to do some highlighting on the raised areas and any parts of the tunic where the light might naturally fall. After a coat of the pure Mephiston red, I'm going to gradually add in Evil Sun's Scarlet, and I'm going to keep building up the layers, with each layer focusing more and more on the raised surfaces. I'm going to do 3 coats total, with the last coat being just a fine edge highlight on the tops of the shoulders. And that finishes the red. We're going back to brown now to do the boots. Use any brown you want for this. I'm using Gorthor brown to mix up the brown tones on the miniature, and because I don't use Gorthor all that much, and it's good to give all your paints a workout every once in a while. Same story here though, I've thinned the paint and I'm applying 2 coats to get solid coverage. We are going to shade those boots, but before we do, it makes sense to paint the gloves. We're going to be using Xandri Dust for this to get a nice tan leather look. We just need to make sure we are neat here. With that done, we can do our shading. We're going to use Agrax Earthshade, and we're going to put a healthy wash of this over the boots and the gloves. And then with that shade dry, we will go back to our base colours to do some highlighting. First Gorthor brown for the boots. Then Xandri Dust for the gloves. And with that done, our dwarf is finished, although we do still need to paint his shield, which I've kept separate. When I painted my human warrior, I made his shield look very battered and used. We're going to do a slightly newer shield for our dwarf. We are starting with a base coat of Chaos Black, and then we are covering the whole thing with Mournfang Brown. With that dry, we are going to pick out the details on the shield using 3 different colours. Xandri Dust for the handle of the hammer insignia, Lead Belcher for the hammer head, and Balthazar Gold for the shield rim. And again, we're going to thin the paint slightly, we're going to be neat, we're going to take our time. And then once we have all those base coats down, we are going to hit the whole shield with some Agrax Earthshade. That will dry in all the recesses for shading, and it will do its magic by making the shield feel used and real. Then we can go back over the 3 base coats to do some highlighting, and that will be the shield all done. Very quick, very easy, and it doesn't look too bad at all. After gluing that shield onto the dwarf, there is only one thing left to do, and it's the base. I'm not going to be doing that now because I have a separate video on my channel that goes through my process for painting these bases in a lot of detail. And that means we are done. Thank you so much to all the members of the Always Bored Never Boring Club, and thank you everyone for taking some of your time to listen to me today. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.